Would you keep the triple lock?
Yes.
The US-UK trade deal, would you have signed it?
No, absolutely not.
Would you push the nuclear button? Love podcasts, hate nonsense. It's the PoliticsJOE podcast.
Good decision. Good decision.
So we're joined by Zack Polanski, who is a leadership candidate for the Green Party as we speak. The election for that next month, right? We're going to have results in September.
Yeah, anyone who joins before July 31st can vote in the leadership election. I get that in Italy.
A plug. He's plugging already. Do you have anything you're selling at the moment? Do you want to put any discount code?
Just Green Party membership. Vote in our internal democracy.
In fact, I have some cards right here.
Yeah. What can they use? Code Zack, and then what do they get? Like, they get you as leader. Ah, there we go. So we didn't actually tell Zack what the intro was there. We said clap if you feel you'd like to. Mm-hmm. And he did.
He did look kind of panicked for the seconds before we kicked off, but you made the right decision.
Yeah, I'm pleased I made the right decision. Uh-huh. They're always the scary questions, those quick questions, long questions you've gotten. But when someone says, clap for this moral issue.
Yeah, for this moral quandary. That would have been a really good format. We should do that, shouldn't we?
Oh, damn it.
We just change the intro every time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Joined by Seán Hickey, of course.
Of course.
Well.
As not always, but sometimes. Sometimes.
You're not really a day. Thursday's not really a day. So this is
No, it's not. It's usually, I keep myself fallow on a Thursday usually.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tuesday is my regular slot.
You transcend the calendar.
Yeah.
Just float down every so often.
So we're going to do a few of your questions that you submitted yesterday on the Patreon, and I really enjoyed going through all of them. Zack, I've got to get one out of the way because there were a lot of questions about this, and I'm really sorry. I'm starting this off on a bad foot. A lot of people asked yesterday, what is the point in voting for the Greens? So I think there's a good argument. I'm going to set you up. I'm going to give you a little gentle setup here.
Right.
You do have 4 MPs, and there were 39 constituencies at the general election where Greens came second. You nearly pipped Labour to the post. So I will gently say that perhaps there is veracity in voting Green. But how would you sell it?
Massively, if people want to lower their bills, if they want to make sure we're defending the National Health Service, if they want to tax the rich, so we're redistributing it to help reduce inequality. The Green Party got nearly 2 million votes. We're the only party in the last 8 local elections that made net gains in every single local election. So whether you're talking policy or whether you're talking strategy, policy-wise, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I really believe strongly that we have the best policies for the country. Polling, by the way, shows that too. People frequently say that the Green Party is the most liked and the most trusted party. The sticking point comes, they go, oh, you can't win, so what would be the point in voting for you? And I think what we demonstrated at the last election is when we work within a community or a constituency, when we have a powerful story to tell and we fund it and we resource it with volunteers, there's nowhere we can and can't win. So I'm really convinced that the next election, we're going to be looking at a lot more MPs for the Green Party, both next year's local elections, as big elections in London and Manchester and lots of cities. Wales, we're hopefully going to break through to the Senedd for the first time, which is really exciting.
Do you think that really?
About breaking through the
You're going to break through, really?
Oh, almost definitely. Anthony Slaughter, who's the lead candidate, even when he's being asked questions right now, it very often is, you're definitely going to break through next year to the Senedd, but how many Senedd members are you going to win? Mm-hmm. There's been a change in voting system to proportional representation, so this is a slightly sneaky answer, but I'm being honest about it, but that's also going to help us that, every vote definitely counts under that system now too.
Because you know who else is pretty confident? Actually, maybe we should save that because I think there's a whole
Farage section.
Yeah, of course.
There is a whole Farage section. We'll come back to that. Seán, you go for it.
Sorry, and I think that's the biggest point in voting Green right now is that people have really rejected the old party politics. I hear on doorsteps over and over again, I'm not going to vote Labour, I'm not going to vote Green. And as counterintuitive as it sounds that people are going, oh, Reform or Greens, when I consider as literally the opposites of each other. But there is a responsibility for the Green Party, and it's partly why I'm running for leader, to step up and say to those disillusioned voters and people who have never voted before, Farage is a millionaire who is cosplaying for the working class, but he's actually serving the billionaires. And the Green Party are the party that will actually stand for those working class communities and stand for those disillusioned people who have been so badly treated by decades of austerity politicians.
Just on your leadership campaign, do you think not being an MP makes it more difficult for you in the campaign? I mean, you've got the current co-leader, Adrian Ramsey, who's running as a co-leader with Ellie Jones. Do you think it could do you better, maybe, to have a co-leader candidate as well? Or it's better for you to run on your own, stand outside of Westminster. What does that represent in your campaign?
Yeah, I actually think it's a huge advantage. So every single Green Party election where our leader has not been an MP, we've historically done much better. Where our leader has also been the MP, we've often dipped down. That is no kind of criticism of the MPs. In fact, it's the opposite. They're doing a really good job. But Carla Daniel, when she stepped down, was very explicit that she was stepping down to focus on being a good constituency MP. Now, if you've got a huge team of MPs, then it obviously makes sense for your leader to be within that team of MPs, because the other MPs can carry on, the workload of Westminster day in and day out. And then that leader can be the person who's, yes, doing media, but also a huge amount of traveling around the country and movement building. So I think my entire focus in this leadership campaign has been, let the MPs focus on Westminster. I'm going to go around the country helping us to build the movement we're already building, key in with key campaign organizations, trade unions, communities, make sure that we're really present in those communities doing the work. Now, that's sometimes been misinterpreted by the mainstream media as they're the elected candidates, I'm the activist candidate. That's a major misreading. I've been elected longer than the MPs have in the London Assembly, so I've got electoral experience. But also what's true is I don't think unless we embrace activism, we're going to see loads of MPs going to Parliament next time. So my entire approach is focused on Westminster as the end point. You're working within these communities to win loads more MPs that you can then send to Westminster to create the change for these communities. But I think focusing on Westminster would be a fundamental mistake, because people hate Westminster. They hate the establishment politicians. So why would you have a party that is focused on being liked and accepted by the same group of people that these communities have been so let down by, as opposed to being in those communities? I'm really excited that the next group of MPs might be people who haven't even joined the Green Party yet. They're people that I meet in those communities regularly who are like, oh, I'm not interested in politics. I or someone else gets into a chat with them and they go, oh, I didn't know the Green Party stood for that. I just thought you were about forests and polar bears. But actually they learn about our racial justice, social justice, economic justice policies. They learn that we're there to reduce bills and all the things I was just talking about. And this isn't abstract. I'm seeing it happen over and over again, where more and more people are joining the Green Party who are coming from those communities, who are saying, I didn't realize that the Green Party was such a kind of diverse coalition of people. I think that's really exciting.
Do you think there's going to have to be, can you see yourself restructuring the party and perhaps ironing out some of your policies? Because, just there you're talking about the social and economic policies that you have. Arguably, some of those policies work in conflict with each other. So you might have a very good, a very strong stance on, say, building renewable energy. But then you've got Adrian Ramsey, who is obviously running to be co-leader with Ellie Chance, who rejected planning applications for renewable pylons, up there. Was it the Suffolk coast? I think it was. It was somewhere on the east coast. That to me is quite confused messaging. Do you want to work to sort of iron out how you're delivering these policies?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be trade-offs in politics, because that's politics, right? That you've got lots of competing priorities, and the case is always what are your higher priorities here? I think when Adrian was talking about that, he often said that I'm first and foremost a constituency MP. And that's another reason, I think, to have a leader who is not in Westminster, because ultimately we need a leader of a movement, someone who can speak for the party. It might sound surprising when I'm running against Adrian, but I would defend some of the decisions he's made around that. So he's never actually opposed them. That was just something Ed Miliband pretty much made up on his first day of Parliament, which I thought was pretty cool.
Ed Miliband made that up, so Adrian did not oppose those pylons.
What he's been arguing for is proper consultation around the pylons. Now, someone could say that's just semantics, and actually I strongly believe that we do need renewable energy and we can have that and protect nature. But I don't think Adrian disagrees with that either. What I think he's saying is how do you make sure that you're protecting nature and making sure that renewable energy is going in the right place? Now, this often gets called NIMBYism, and Rachel Reeves, talks about the bats and the newts being a problem. But the Wildlife Trust released a report just a couple of weeks ago that said in 97% of cases, bats and newts are just not even an issue. So actually a lot of this has been manufactured to point at parties like the Greens, whereas actually the problem here is, this is more with housing, property developers. We need to be building lots of council houses, but the property developers are not planning to build council houses, and many of them are land banking and sitting on these things as assets, just allowing the money to go up.
And that annoys me, but let's pull back for 1 minute here. So would you have whipped Adrian Ramsey if you were leader? For example, say there had been a vote tomorrow on whether that this renewable structure could have gone in that constituency. would you have whipped him to vote for it?
So we don't have a whip in the party. So that's, I guess, another distinctive thing about the party, that
But
MPs...
even in Parliament, you're not going to have a whip.
No. So the point is that people are elected by their constituents and then they decide to vote based on what their constituents want. That all being said, they are voted in on the Green Party manifesto, which is decided by members. Every member has one member, one vote. So this is complex. This is balancing democracy of the party and the democracy of the constituents. And that can get messy at times. And I think that's really good. I think when you try and eliminate all messiness, you end up with what Keir Starmer's party has become, which is just that kind of authoritarian, everyone has to fall into the line. There is no space here for dissent. There is no space here to genuinely represent what you're listening to your communities to do. So to come to the original question, because I realise I've been to a few different topics here. In terms of restructuring, I'd say restructuring would be dramatic, but what I really want to look at is things like community organising units. So Jeremy Corbyn had this at the beginning of his tenure. It was eliminated, I believe, in week 1 of Keir Starmer getting in. He said, no, we're not going to have communities organising themselves. We're just doing top-down politics. And I think the answer to the conversation we're just having, whether it's on housing or renewable energy, is to empower communities more to make sure that their voice is heard louder. Now, whether you do that within a party, I think is a live conversation, because actually I worry that if you organise a community within a party, very quickly you end up becoming Labour, because at some point within that structure, they then go, we're going to support this person to be MP, and then we're going to have to support everything they do. And actually, I think politicians, including myself, should always be held accountable, including by their own membership. So I'm interested in what does a structure look like where we support communities to empower themselves, to organise themselves, but they remain independent from a political party. We are still there to represent them and to do their work up until the point they feel like we're not doing that, and then they can kick us out. But hopefully that won't happen, and actually they go, I've got a really good Green representative who is still representing this community, and I can hear the coherency between how they're balancing these different trade-offs.
So it's like a coalition of the willing.
Yeah, I guess so.
Do you think that could end up reverting the Green Party into that kind of old trope of Green politicians across Europe, that without a solid structure of what the Green Party stands for economically, socially, whatever, and on a constituency basis and a council, local government, national government basis, you end up allowing parties that have a more solid structure of what they stand for to kind of point to the Green Party and say, well, they're just hippy-dippy, they want to preserve bat caves, they want to make sure that the newt doesn't go extinct, and not take seriously what you actually stand for economically or socially.
Yeah, and it's not even a hypothetical question, because we've got the Liberal Democrats, right? They've got 72 MPs. I'm not going to knock that. I would love 72 MPs right now. But could we really say what they stand for? I think on the first day of Parliament, Ed Davey was out on Parliament Green kicking a football, offering a FIFA contest to Keir Starmer. A way of grabbing attention, sure, but not a coherent kind of political narrative. So this is where emotive storytelling becomes really important. And so, yes, to the grassroots community organising, which is at the centre of my pitch. And then the other centre of my pitch, so these are the two pillars really, is about that kind of, who are we as a party? What is the story we are telling? And let's be absolutely unambiguous about what do we stand for and what do we stand against. And that's why I talk about bold leadership. It's both my leadership in terms of hopefully being the future of the leader of a party, saying this is clearly what we stand for, and these things are unconditional. This is really clear what the party stands for. But also it's the leadership of all of those communities too. It's all the leadership of people who are already leaders within their communities. And it's about the relationship between the people who are elected from the party, including its internal leadership, and making sure we're always staying congruent with those communities. I absolutely believe that can be done. Do I believe it's incredibly hard work? Yes, I know that because I do it all the time. It's always about walking the tightrope between the soft power of explaining why you're doing something, why you've made a decision, and making sure that's co-designed with the people most affected, but also not being a blank sheet of paper, but making sure you're still listening. So even once you've decided your story, once you've decided where you're going, you have the behavioral flexibility to go, I'm still listening to you and I'm still taking that feedback on board. Let's always balance this.
Okay, let's workshop this then.
Nice.
Right, so you've got, say for example, let's go back, let's use the Adrian Ramsey pylon situation as our pilot of this, right? So
a pylon pilot.
Yeah, so say for example, you decide that actually as leader, we need to have some sort of renewable energy source in Suffolk. We need to have it in Ramsey's constituency. He comes back to you and says, look, this is not good for my constituents to have these pylons. I actually want to open a consultation that might take 10 years, because they do. What do you say to him?
why is the consultation taking 10 years? Let's go to your constituency and talk to your constituents. Let's have a community meeting. Let's talk about making sure they know what the problem is, i.e. the climate crisis, and also that this will reduce their bills, and also make sure that taking the constituents' needs into account too. And I don't think you can do that any other way by having difficult conversations and getting in a room and talking about that.
What if they say no? Because it's likely they will.
Well,
no one wants a pylon.
Well, I can think of examples where I have gone to a community meeting and have changed people's minds. The most obvious one is low traffic neighborhoods, for instance.
You won a group over about LTN.
I wouldn't say a group, that would probably be overly dramatic.
Okay.
But definitely.
I was going to say, make
One
it Prime
person
Minister.
showed up.
Yeah.
But key people who had kind of very entrenched views. And I think that's the openness to both hold what you hold really strongly and also have the flexibility to be able to listen. And again, I don't think any of this is abstract. I've taken a lot of inspiration from what Zoran's doing in New York City, and I've seen him over and over again. I think there's been a problem on
Wait,
the left.
what's your inspiration that you're taking from him?
About having those difficult conversations and not shying away from them. I've been out on the streets too with a microphone doing the kind of vox poppy stuff. Yes, that's one for social media.
How he demeans our work.
But two, I've also done it genuinely when the camera is not on, because I think it's really useful to go out and talk to people. I think what we struggle with sometimes on the broader left, and definitely in the Green Party, is being conflict averse, or the idea of any kind of confrontation or difficult conversation is going to be a problem because people might disagree. Now, I don't know if it's because I'm from a Jewish family and there's a kind of old trope that if you put 4 Jews in the room, they'll have 5 different opinions. Like, it's a very disagreeable culture that I grew up in. But I really thrive on disagreement, and I thrive on respectful disagreement. So everyone says their point of view, you argue robustly about it, and then a decision is made, and collective responsibility generally means you go, okay, that's the decision that's been made. And I think Zoran has really exemplified that in terms of the way he's held lots of different kind of perspectives. New York City is a diverse and broad city, as London is and as the UK is. And I think we need more skilled politicians who are able to be in conflict situations and go, even if you're shouting at me, I'm still here and I'm still listening. As I'm saying this, someone else who's very good at this, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but was Jacob Rees-Mogg. I always did admire, there's so much I disliked about his politics and the way he handled himself, but you would frequently see him go talk to the public, especially when they were angry, and just hold themselves and have a conversation about those things. And I think that is a really important part of politics.
He was very popular in his constituency.
Yeah, exactly. And I think for that reason, even when people disagreed with him, they thought, you know what, he's going to turn up and not bullshit me. I think that's really important.
Do you think there's much bleed over between 2024 Labour voters and what could be the base of the Green Party if you were to be elected as the leader?
Yeah, the data shows there is. So over half of people who voted Labour in 2024 are now talking about voting for the Greens or Liberal Democrats. I clearly think we've got a strong case to make to say vote Green Party and not Liberal Democrat. And I was about to list all the failures of the Labour government, but I'd be doing that politician thing where I give you a list of failures. So I'll hope your audience already know why I'm so critical of this government.
I think maybe we should go through some of those failures, actually.
Okay, so on disability cuts, winter fuel payments, the 2-child benefit cap,
Well, let's go a
genocide
little
in
bit
Gaza.
slowly. Let's go a
okay.
bit slowly. Yeah, I love that. Cut you off at the Gaza bit. All right, okay, enough of that. Disability cuts.
Yes.
The vote, obviously, it went through last night. It had its 3rd reading in the Commons. How would you, as the Green Party, have approached that differently? Because I'll set up the establishment argument.
Yeah.
Which is that there isn't enough money in the coffers. We cannot afford to continue the welfare payment trajectory that we're on. It's nearly doubled since COVID. What's your counter narrative to that argument, and how would you approach that differently?
So I think the first counter narrative is there's plenty of wealth in this country, in fact, more than ever before. Since COVID, billionaires have increased in this country and their wealth has doubled, while ours, in terms of our assets, is absolutely being stripped away. We've seen a very coherent and directed strategy of moving money from the public purse into private capital. It's very clear that we need to tax the rich. That's through a wealth tax, but also things like bringing capital gains tax in line with income tax. Right now, we are taxing nurses.
You would do that?
Sorry?
You would do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right now,
Wow.
we're taxing nurses sometimes more than we're taxing millionaires. We are taxing unearned wealth less than we tax earned income. I think when you have that conversation for more than 20 seconds with anyone, they just go, actually, that's totally unfair and ludicrous. I did a kind of short video recently where I met some migrant cleaners who were working with the migrants union United Voices of the World. Then in the afternoon, I met a patriotic millionaire. The phrase he used to me, patriotic millionaire is a group of millionaires who are saying taxes more. He said to me, if I own the building, I could be paying less tax than the cleaners you met this morning who are cleaning the building. That's completely incoherent. The second thing I want to say, though, is suppose this wasn't true and we couldn't tax the rich, and I absolutely believe we can. This is then again about priorities. At what point do you choose disabled people and go, those are the people right now who I'm going to take benefits away from, especially when a lot of them, like PIP, is an in-work benefit. So it's the most cruel strategy you could possibly imagine. It doesn't raise that much money, and it's based entirely on fiscal rules that are entirely imaginary, that Rachel Reeves has made up, decided to stick to after she's put herself into this narrow kind of corner. And then if you were going to create a very dark kind of irony about all of this, the markets don't even like her fiscal rules anyway. So she did it all to send them a signal. They've rejected that signal. Our public services are broken and being destroyed. And the Labour government are deeply unpopular and reform is circling in. So I think on every possible metric that you could imagine, Labour have fumbled this ball so badly. And now reform are either going to swoop in, or we have a responsibility to build the left and have a stronger Green Party who is there to say these are all results of political choices, and we can and will make different political choices.
Before we talk about reform, should we listen to what Kemi Badenoch had to say yesterday about wealth taxes?
Mr. Speaker, investors are fleeing the country. They're fleeing the country. We on this side of the House know that you cannot tax your way to growth.
So that was Leader of the Opposition there, Kemi Badenoch, and she was arguing that, she's talking about tax and spend, that she's making the argument that Labour are going to have to raise taxes. And she says that will lead to millionaires fleeing the country.
I mean, absolutely absurd. This is trickle-down economics just dressed up in a different form. I don't know if anyone's noticing the wealth of multimillionaires and billionaires helping them out right now. Henley and Partners, a group that sell golden passports to the super rich, did a study that said wealthy people will leave the country if you tax them. It's largely been discredited. It came from LinkedIn profiles, which is how they kind of did their analysis.
As good a source as any.
And also on top of that, even if you dig into the data, it looks like 0.3% of billionaires will leave. Yet when you talk to people who work for the NHS, 30% of them are talking about leaving because the service is so bad and they're worried about where the country is going. I'm a lot more worried about doctors and nurses than I am about multimillionaires and billionaires.
That's a really interesting comparison. I have not heard that comparison being made before.
Well, can I make a harder argument? So I've just made the easy argument, but I think there's a harder argument I want to make going forward. And this is kind of not found the easy way to articulate it yet, but it's a good way to find it, is that very often on the left, we kind of move straight away to let's tax the rich. And absolutely, I totally stand by that. And I think the first place we need to be looking, taxing the rich, capital gains tax. Also, the Bank of England is still paying off commercial banks for money that they lent them, despite the fact that they created this money from nowhere. So again, all absurd. It would be very tempting to get into a kind of narrative frame, which is about ordinary people, including us here, as ordinary people, most people, you don't need to pay any more tax. It's just about the super rich. And I think that would be a misleading argument to make, because actually I think we do all need to pay more tax. And I think we need to have politicians who are willing to make the argument that having better public services is good for everyone. And if we're going to tackle inequality in this country, we need to make sure that we have a NHS that actually works, that we don't have water companies pumping sewage into the waters and us paying extra for the privilege. So we need to nationalise those water companies. And it's a harder argument to make because it's very easy to turn to everyone and go, you won't have to pay a single penny more tax. This is all going to be on multimillionaires and billionaires. I think the vast majority of it, and I really mean the vast majority of it, does need to be from the super rich. But also, if we need to raise the kind of money that we're talking about, I think we do need to look at how do politicians start to build the argument that actually we all benefit from a society that is properly funded, that has proper public services, and inequality affects us all, both obviously from people living in poverty, they're clearly the worst hit by it, but even the super rich would benefit from a more equal society, because an equal society is a happier society.
You see, okay, so one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today actually is younger people and getting them into politics. It's very difficult to incentivize young people to head to the ballot box. They will be out on the campaign trail. They will be out delivering your leaflets. For some reason, they don't necessarily vote. And the argument that you've just set out there about paying more tax, I wonder, I mean, you might have a different opinion on this, but I wonder, would it be ill received by particularly sort of younger millennials and Gen Zs who are already paying back the ludicrous student loan tax, because that's what it is, while also facing the prospect of wage stagnation, and also income tax thresholds being frozen, which means that they're paying, well, they're paying a lot more tax for sure than their parents ever did.
Yeah.
So how would you make that argument to a young person that you're already struggling to get to go to the ballot box?
Yeah, I think two things. So one, the young people I speak to, and admittedly they're often a self-selecting group because I'm going to places where young people have come to hear me and ask me questions. I think they get the argument mostly and agree that actually us all paying a bit more tax and having better public services would make us more like most of Europe, where things are working a lot better than they are in this country right now. But second, let me deal with the group that might go, no, I absolutely don't want to do that. I think that would be fair enough if you kept everything else the same and turned to young people and went, you lot are the problem here. You need to pay more tax. That would clearly be ludicrous. The problem here is Shell. The problem here is with fossil fuel barons. So we come back to the idea that the polluter pays, and that needs to be the first place that you start, on the people who've caused the crisis. I also think we need to look at the fact that universities have been privatized and CEOs of universities are making ludicrous sums while we're asking the younger people to foot the bill for their own education. An educated public that often benefits the rest of us, because they're the ones who then go into services such as, it could be science and research, whatever it is. So I think we need to have a whole new look at education too. My point here is you've got to be holistic in terms of systems change about the whole thing. I think just tinkering at the edges and going, yeah, it's time for you to pay more tax would clearly be badly received and also would be the moral and ethically wrong thing to do. But if you have a green government and you're going, here is the vision we're setting, this is why we're taking this money from the super rich, and also we're asking you to contribute a little bit too, because it's going to improve all of our lives, I think that's a vision worth selling. And I think in politics, we've lost two really obvious things. One, I think politicians, particularly on the left, and I know you guys have talked about this before, have lost anger. And I think that's because I got accused at Glastonbury the other day. I was on a panel where I was talking about this, and someone said, if you're just angry, you're just fueling Farage. And there's a legitimacy to that point of view, which is why I'm not just angry. But I think if you miss connecting with people's anger and just go to hope and just go to solutions, you are literally out of touch. And the truth is, I'm really pissed off. I think everyone should be pissed off right now. I go knocking on doors, whether it's on housing estates or whether it's I'm in the community hall, and you listen to people's stories and you listen to how many people in this country are being screwed over right now as a result of political choices. I think if you're not angry, you've not really been listening to what that person's saying. But I think if you just stay in anger, you're not helping anyone. You're just kind of feeling the anger, which is important, but not offering a solution. You got to connect with the anger, connect first, take that bite, and then move to hopeful solutions, then move to tangible change. And the tangible change has to be credible. But this argument about not being credible is something that often gets thrown at people on the left and Green Party politicians. What I would say is not credible is the exact situation we've got now, where we do have a genocide in Gaza. The public are saying, we don't want that. That's horrific. And there's never been a wider gap between where the public are at and where the establishment politicians are at. That's an incredibly dangerous situation to be in. The fact that we are cutting police numbers, police are already, many communities feel like they're being over-policed and underprotected. Again, that's not sustainable. I could go through lots of different situations.
And underprotected, that's very interesting. So what do you mean? Are you talking about sort of surveillance culture? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, or even, stop and search, for instance. So,
right, okay, yeah.
Young black men are stopped and searched, I think, 8 times more in London than their white peers. Yet there's no evidence at all that there's that relates to the drug use that's being used. That's often in white communities, and it's often cocaine as well. So there's lots of different data about that. Do also want to say...
Cocaine, is that a white drug?
Sorry?
Cocaine, a white drug?
Not necessarily, but I think when you look at the data, yes, it's often used by white communities who are wealthier. I mean, it depends. You've got to follow the data and science on this. The other policy that we have in this is to legalize and regulate drugs, because I think the idea that the war on drugs is working is complete nonsense. And in fact, what we've done is push people into black markets and push people to take dangerous substances, as opposed to, credit to Steve Khan on this. My colleague Zoe Garbutt in the Assembly has been pushing him for a long time around drugs, and then he set up the London Drugs Commission. He seems to be doing nothing with that commission now that the data's out. But the data showed very, very clearly that the war on drugs in London, I mean, you didn't need data to show that. I think it's very obvious is failing. And actually, we need a much more sensible and grown-up conversation. I can't believe I just said grown-up conversation. A much more sensible conversation that's based in data around drug use and what does kind of better look like, and make it a public health approach rather than a criminal approach.
Okay.
Just back to what you were saying earlier on about taxation, but more broadly, the politics of like realism and a leftism that is based in reality and what needs to be done for the future. Last week, you had Zara Sultana defecting or resigning from the Labour Party, calling for a new party of the left. Do you think your leadership of the Green Party could encourage some sort of unity of a new left in the UK? And how does kind of your vision of what the left could be blend in with kind of the Corbyn Sultana type of leftism of the old Labour Party?
Yeah, absolutely. I saw a really funny tweet the other day that was I posted to say how much I welcomed kind of Zara leaving Labour and that I'd work with anyone. And then someone tweeted and said, he's smiling about this, but he's so clearly gritting his teeth. I just thought it was interesting because the honest truth is I saw the tweet and I had nothing but elation was my first thought. I just thought, I love Zara Sultana. I think she's great. And I think there's lots of Labour MPs on the left who are also great. And I've just really struggled to watch them still be in Labour through all the things that we've just talked about and give really good speeches and vote the right way, but still go. But you're still in this party. And actually what you're doing is giving Keir Starmer the opportunity to go, oh, look, we're not all that bad. I've got Clive Lewis and I've got Zara Sultana and I've got Diane Abbott. Like, it kind of provides a shield to go, we're not that bad. Because
Why are they not in the Green Party?
Well, so this is where I was going to get to. So I was elated. And then the real truth is I was really frustrated a second later because I just thought, this makes no sense. The Green Party have over 800 councillors, 4 MPs, nearly 2 million votes for the last election. And we're literally having a leadership election right now where I'm running on a ticket where I'm saying the politics of environmental, social, racial and economic justice, the same politics that they're talking about, come join the party. Like if you align with our values, then whether you're a member or an MP, come join the party. So it made absolutely no sense and still makes no sense to me to start a new party. But as soon as I got over kind of myself, I got into self-reflection and went, well, this is where the Green Party hasn't succeeded yet. Like we've clearly not communicated that. It's not about Zara and Jeremy. I mean, sorry, it is about them, but it's actually about the millions of people who support their politics who are not going, the Green Party is the natural home for me. And I think that's because we've not been bold enough. We've not been clear enough about our values. And I think we've not been willing enough to have those fights. I think we've run away from fights or we've tried not to be divisive. But politics is divisive. I don't think you should go be divisive just for the sake of it. That's what Farages does, just courts attention. But I do think there are times where you go, actually, we need to be at the centre of this debate. And even if the Daily Mail, or even more so, if the Daily Mail are going to attack us, the Daily Mail can't write more articles about me at the moment on a weekly basis. They just keep going, now we're going to write another article about that. I see that nothing as a badge of honour. That's the Daily Mail going, the politics that he is now presenting for the Green Party is a threat to the establishment. It's a threat to the status quo. And just as we've seen with other politicians in the past, they will do anything they can to bring you down. I think you can't shy away from that. You just have to buckle up and go, this isn't about me. It's about all the communities I was just talking about. Let's run at this because ultimately we do know we have the public on our side. So in terms of left unity, where I am at right now is I still absolutely want to make the case in this leadership election that anyone who wants to see the politics that Zara and Jeremy are aligning themselves with is the politics of the Green Party.
You'd welcome her into the party.
Oh, 100. Like I have thought about having like a gimmick prop of a red carpet and like just rolling it out towards the Green Party office and be like, this is your ticket, Zara. And I have to caveat at this time, which is a bit more boring, but it's true, is it's not my decision. So there's a Green Party regional council who are an elected body within the party who make decisions about defections alongside the parliamentary group. But in terms of a straight question, my straight answer is that I think it's a huge shame and a tragedy that Zara Sultana doesn't go. I'm so obviously at home in the Green Party.
We can go into Farage, shouldn't we? We probably
yeah.
And do you know what? At this point of it, everyone's going to be commenting underneath. Why are you talking about Nigel Farage?
But we made it long enough without mentioning him. Didn't we?
Well, I think we did it in the first 2 minutes. But that's the what is it? The Blechdale test.
He's also polling highest in the country. So I think to ignore him is ignoring one of the main conversations in the country right now. It's really telling that Keir Starmer Like, you rarely see him interviewed or heard. You see him in kind of parliament, but I don't really see him that much outside of that context. Whereas Farage, you see on everything all the time, dominating the conversation.
And how do you counter that? I mean, I'll give you an example. One of the things that honestly, not really a lot shocks me when I'm talking to the public. But when I went to a few reform rallies, they've got to rename them. I don't think that that's a great...
Reform
Do
rally.
you know what I mean? Anyway.
I think we're probably not the target audience.
No, but rally, you know what I'm saying?
Oh, right. Okay.
Anyway, I spoke to a few younger people there. When I say young people, I mean people who are under 25. And they all told me, not they all, but a few of them told me they were former Corbyn voters.
Right.
Who had now been persuaded into the Reform Party. So what do you do about the narrative that Farage is spinning at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw this in America, where lots of Bernie Sanders voters in the primary ended up going on to vote for Donald Trump. And whilst that's depressing and worrying, I also think there is a huge opportunity here for the Green Party, but not just for the party, for the country, because what those people are saying is we reject the old two-party politics. We want to see politicians who do not have vested interests, who work for us. Now, I was on Sky News the other day with Reform's former head of communications. I don't even want to say his name. Let's not make him more famous. GT.
I was going to say,
Gawain.
for context, Gawain Fowler,
I always worry with these.
He also, which you've negated to mention here, typical politician, he was also the head of press for Fathers for Justice.
No, I actually didn't know that.
Use his full title, Zach.
Yeah.
People. Okay. I was on TV with him, and he was talking about, anti-climate crisis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just said, the thing the viewers need to know right now is that Reform, since the 2019 election, have taken £2.3 million in donations from fossil fuel companies and climate-denying companies. That's 95% of their donations. He said this wasn't true. I turned to the presenter and said, it's your job right now as a news organisation to fact-check this. I might have got it wrong. He might be lying. Spoiler, he was lying. It's your job right now to say this. I always like the George Carlin quote about politicians should have to wear jerseys like NASCAR drivers that says who's sponsoring them. Because when Reform are pretending that they're standing up for working class communities, I think it's really important we keep cutting through so that people know that they are working literally for multimillionaires and billionaires that they are rallying against. But they've been very smart, like to see them at Scunthorpe on the kind of having a photo opportunity with the steel workers, saying nationalise the steel industry.
They led that conversation.
100%. And I think that's an example again of where the only thing that the Green Party need to be doing, and I think it's entirely possible, is to be bolder with our communications and leading the conversation. I think that requires you, again, to go, here's a really clear vision, here's a very coherent thought pattern about what we stand for as a party, and then it's very obvious for photo opportunities. And again, it's not just a photo opportunity to go to the communities and speak to those workers. And as deputy leader, I was at Port Talbot just a few weeks before that closed down. It didn't get the profile that I wanted it to because I was deputy leader and I wasn't running in a leadership contest and I didn't have a team of people to go, okay, let's make this a moment. But it was very clear to me that the biggest thing we needed at that moment was a politician speaking to the workers and talking to them and talking about what a just transition looks like. Annoyingly, Keir Starmer went there the next day. And I just go, if we timed it a little bit differently, we could have been there on the same day and that would have been a media moment. But anyway, I can't control Keir Starmer's diary or know about it. But the point here being is, I think the way we counter it is by speaking over the heads of establishment media, which is why I'm glad to be on your podcast, but also to literally be in those communities, to be having those conversations. That's exactly why I talk about a community organising unit. I also think it's not about my leadership, it's about the people in those communities and their social media, because it's been put to me before, and you've been kind enough not to put it to me yet, but maybe you will do, that I don't strike you as the obvious leader of the working class movement or the obvious leader of people in Scunthorpe. But I think no politician can always be everything to everyone, and nor should they pretend to be. We often talk about charisma in politics, and what I interpret that is authenticity, just being really comfortable with who you are, where you've come from and where you're going, and speaking to people where they're at and making sure you create a connection. You can do that and not have to pretend to be anything else that you're not. But it's also important that we have representation. So the reason why I want to have this focus on communities is I want to train up people in those communities on social media. So ultimately their stories of their community are being told. And again, I think it's something you guys do well. Ed did that brilliant video where I can't remember where he went now, but went to speak to workers, particularly around new technologies and how alienating that was. And it was amazing that he was speaking to workers who live in this country, who are working alongside migrant workers, and there is no division there at all. They're really, really enjoying the job and the work that they do. I think telling these stories, but making sure we're centering the people who are actually being affected by the stories, is the way to change this
So
narrative.
he's just going to nick our content strategy.
Well, I think
That's the new Green Party proposal.
I think this comes back to your question about why our leader needs to not be in Parliament, because if you're in Parliament, you're in that parliamentary bubble, as you should be. But I don't think change is going to come from there. And I do wonder, would Farage be even more effective right now if he wasn't an MP? Because actually, there becomes a point where we keep seeing him on the green benches. We keep seeing him be absorbed by the very establishment he was rallying against. And I just, wonder if there's a moment where he goes, actually, I was even more effective when I was outside of Parliament.
Do you think, though, okay, so the problem that,
I mean, he's never in Parliament, I suppose, is the answer to that, though.
he was there yesterday.
Sorry.
The problem that is, one of the major grievances that is facing young people at this moment, and actually if you look at a lot of the polling, you'll see that this has become one of the most important issues facing them, is the economy and is the money in people's back pockets. And I think for the first time in a long time, actually, now, when you look at the polling, it's overtaken climate change as one of the major preoccupations of people under 30. I mean, that is absolutely extraordinary because, I mean, when I went to university, it's all we talked about was climate change. How can you make the argument against someone like Farage, who basically just tours the country saying, I'm going to put money in your wallet? How will you counter that with the sort of, I suppose, softer morality points that you've presented to us today?
Yeah, I guess the answer is I'm going to put money in your wallets. And this is why I talk about eco-populism. I think for too long, the environment movement more widely, we've gone straight to the climate crisis. I think the worst case scenario of that was talking about the polar bears in the Amazon rainforest, things that I deeply care about. So it's not about rejecting about those, but it's recognizing that those often aren't people's immediate concerns. But on the other side of that too, I think we often talk about the emissions that are in this country and the responsibility we have to reduce those emissions. Also absolutely true. I think those are arguments to be making in Parliament, though. I think the arguments we need to be making to the wider public are if you're worrying about heat in your home, if you're worrying about food on your table, these are all everyday issues that are affected to the climate crisis, but also we have solutions for, things to do. Nationalising the energy companies is exactly what the private energy companies don't want. Right now, oil and gas is linked to renewable energy. That means if oil and gas goes up, even when renewable energy is cheaper, renewable energy goes up too. That is absolutely absurd and completely incoherent.
Break that down as well, because I don't think people quite understand this. Because I know this personally because I lived in a building that was all wind energy.
Oh wow, okay.
But you pay the same market rate as if you were consuming fossil fuels.
I mean, you've broken it down, and exactly, it's to do with the way the grid works, but that's entirely a political choice. And it's not a surprise that the oil and gas companies who fund governments and fund political parties go, you know what, you're not going to change that choice. We could go around that. So we need to be making sure that there are wind turbines on people's roofs, that there's solar panels on every single building that goes up. That we're also looking at tidal energy. So there's a good mix of resilient energies there that are going on, and ultimately that we're reducing oil and gas. But I think, I've been drawn into this conversation again because you just asked me that question, but I don't think that's the beginning of the conversation. I think the beginning of the conversation is we can reduce your bills. And actually this idea of net zero, I said this the other day to another paper, and then they ran the headline that I'm the eco-populist against net zero. Not quite my position. We need to get to net zero. But the way this government is doing it is asking the poorest people to get a heat pump, an electric car. And that's completely irrational, and also is just not going to happen. It's totally unrealistic. The only way we're going to...
So interesting to hear from you.
Well, it's just, again, and I think...
because I think that's the supposition a lot of people would have about a Green politician, that you'd be out there encouraging people to go and spend their money on a heat pump.
Or telling people to be vegan. It's absolutely not my position.
Okay.
We need, I am vegan though, we need system change, and we need that to come from the polluting companies, from big businesses, and ultimately governments who choose to subsidise things. So right now they subsidise jet fuel on private jets, subsidise aviation. But they don't subsidise train travel. I got a train to Sheffield the other day. I think it cost me like 120 quid. To, like,
You got a bargain then, didn't you?
That's true.
Yeah.
And it was the day before, so I could have.
And you shouldn't have been travelling first class, to be fair. Then.
I didn't say I didn't.
The meal would have cost a lot of that.
But yeah, and I think it's about recognising that people are really struggling. And so if you talk to them about what they think is this climate crap, then of course they're going to reject it. And of course they're going to go running into the hands of Farage. I think you need to meet people about the fact that the cost of living crisis isn't really a cost of living crisis. It's an inequality crisis where poor people are poorer than they've ever been before. Rich people are ever richer than they've ever been before. And again, when I take inspiration from Zoran, I think it's just finding the key thing that cuts through and just keep repeating it.
I'm just going to do a quick fire round.
Oh,
Before we end with Sean. Would you keep the triple lock?
Yes.
The US-UK trade deal, would you have signed it?
No, absolutely not.
Would you push the nuclear button?
I mean, the sarcastic person in me then wanted to give you the opposite answer. My truth, I was like, that can be clipped. So I'm just gonna say, no, I wouldn't.
Over it, Sean.
You have touched on it a couple of times at this stage about the situation in Palestine. Just your thoughts on how your party has approached the situation in Gaza, how the government has approached it, what you would do as the leader of the Green Party to kind of change how Britain is acting in Israel's campaign in Gaza.
Yeah, so the first thing is I'm really proud of how the party has responded to it in terms of, I think this is an example of what I've been talking about bold leadership. So being crystal clear about what the situation is, speaking with authenticity, and challenging the powerful about it. Has it been as effective as I want it to be? Clearly not, because the genocide is still going on. And every single day, it seems there's a new kind of horror story about what the Israeli government is planning to do to the Palestinians. Cheered on by Donald Trump, who says he wants to turn Gaza into a luxury condo. What can we do about it? I think that's partly why I welcome MPs leaving the Labour Party, because I think the central mission has to make the Labour government more scared of losing votes and ultimately seats to the Green Party than they are to reform. And to make them more scared of the voters, I mean scared in electoral sense, scared of the voters and losing votes than they are of the vested interests and the corporate money that they take. And the Israeli lobby, now I know that people get nervous about saying the phrase Israeli lobby. I think we need to be really clear as a Jewish person. I don't stand with what Israel are doing. And I think to conflate the idea that I would be Jewish and I would be pro-Israeli is anti-Semitic in itself. And so the idea that you can't say the phrase Israeli lobby because it would be offensive to Jewish people is clearly incoherent nonsense. Israel has a very powerful lobby of PR people who we often see on TV and radio, who often lie and talk absolute nonsense. And then when they are called out on the lie because objective evidence is presented, they apologize. But the apology doesn't mean anything because the next day or a week later, they tell a lie again. I think change is going to come from movements and grassroots communities. I've been proud to stand on almost every Palestine solidarity campaign rally, there's that word again, to speak on those. I'm speaking on Saturday. It's 40 years of the BDS campaign. So I'm going to be speaking at a conference talking about why BDS is boycott, divestment, sanctions is important right now. And those things are all really important. The reason why I'm saying those things is because you would think those crowds would be dying out now because it's just been going on so long and people lose hope. But actually observe that those crowds are getting bigger. And in particular, the Jewish bloc that I've been proud to walk with is getting bigger. More and more Jewish people are saying this is not in my name. I don't want to center Jewish people in this conversation. I want to center Palestinian people in this conversation. But I do think it's important that the people who have been used as a shield to say, oh, we're just protecting Jewish people, are increasingly in numbers saying, no, this is not in our name. We don't stand for this. And ultimately, that anti-Semitism and Islamophobia are two sides of the same coin. And when they come for one of us, they come for all of us. And I've been proud to see Jewish and Muslim communities saying what the establishment are doing all around the world does not represent the amazing community and interfaith work that's happening in cities. How do I think this ends? I think it ends by those MPs who are making these decisions being worried about their seats. I can't give an easy answer to the end of this because I think they should be in their place already. I do think Keir Starmer's at major risk of losing his seat to Andrew Feinstein. I think Wes Streeting's at risk to losing it to Liane Mohammed. I think
He only
they've
won it by a couple of hundred votes.
Yeah,
so-
500 it was, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how they don't look at, I could say this about a lot of Labour MPs, how they don't look at the small margins they have of seats. I mean, I think Jess Phillips is one of the few who's kind of gone, I'm worried here, let's move. A Labour MP who I won't say who they are the other day, a left Labour MP that I was talking to said, there was talk about me running in Walthamstow, and ever since that talk has happened, Stella Creasy has suddenly found a much more left-wing agenda, where she is challenging the government in lots more ways. And they asked me, could you just keep floating different seats that you're standing in, just so you can push some of my colleagues towards more
When you
left
say
positions?
left-wing agenda, are you talking specifically about her stance on the Israel-Gaza, this wing of the conflict? Because this leg of the conflict, because she is rather left-wing.
Yeah, I didn't actually just mean Palestine. I meant a whole series of positions where she hadn't spoken up against the government previously and seems to be finding a new voice on things. I do think she is more on the left of the party than some of the MPs. But I also think there's definitely been some positions where she has voted strangely, or you've clearly just followed the whip there.
I would counter that, but this is not the Stella Creasy interview.
Sure, no, that's fine.
And there are other Stella Creasy interviews available on PoliticsJOE that you can go and
and-
watch now. She just actually achieved decriminalising abortion, and if you'd like to go and see why she did that,
Well, what I was
I
about
used to
to
vote her a
say,
year ago, and that's on the YouTube now.
I was literally about to say that of all MPs, she's not the one that I'm coming for in terms of she's done some really strong work, but including myself, we can always be better, right?
Do you know what? On that note, it's very hot in here. Thank you very much for all of that time that you gave us.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed
Yeah, we'll come back.
it. Thank you.
Great.
Bye.
Oh, wait, and then I just wanted to do a thank you.
There's no clapping at the end.
No
No,
clapping at the end.
only at the start.
But I just wanted to do
I joined the Green Party by July 31st if you're aligned with our values, because you can vote in the leadership.
well, there you go, July
I say
31st.
that?
That's your deadline.
Join.greenparty.org.
And then just to thank Charles, Ben, Matthew, Tom, Chris, Ripley in Space, Matty, Jamie, another Jamie, Tom, Paul, Andrew, Hector and Rox. Thanks for informing our questioning today.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Head to our Patreon, patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. It's the only place you can watch full podcast episodes. From £4 a month, you get access to that video podcast, as well as the group chat and first access to live event tickets. The first of those live events is next month. It's sold out in 4 minutes. Zoom! Was that the klaxon?
Yeah, it's half-arsed, wasn't it?
Yeah. Live event klaxon, please, Sean.
Was that it? Well, my voice is gone from the weekend as well, so it's not really projecting as well as it could.
We are really looking forward to seeing all of you having a beer and a bit of a chit-chat. 1,080 of you have generously chosen to support us on Patreon so far. Become Patreon number 1,081. Head to PoliticsJOE.com. Head to patreon.com/PoliticsJOE. I'm making a right old meal of this. Or the pod is free to listen to still on all audio platforms. Thank you.